Welcome to 28storms.com and the Hurricane Tracker app. This is your tropical weather update for this late Saturday evening, October 8th. Starting first in the Atlantic Basin, the National Hurricane Center has outlined the southwest Bahamas and southeastern Florida. This is where we have a 30% chance of seeing subtropical development within the next 48 hours. This evening's visible and satellite infrared imagery shows that we have much more convection located over Florida and the southwest Atlantic compared to 24 hours ago. However, it is rather disorganized in nature. There are no indications of a surface circulation at this time. However, on the water vapor, the upper level low that we have expected to develop is now already present, and that will increase the upper level divergence over southern Florida, increasing the probability for continued storm development and the possibility of surface low formation over the next 24 to 48 hours. The latest southeast radar mosaic shows much of central and southern Florida still experiencing heavy rainfall even after the sun has gone down, so this is definitely an indication that the upper level forcing is enhancing the shower activity, and this is more than likely going to remain the case for the next couple of days, and that is on top of the rainfall totals that we are already seeing across much of the state. The latest rainfall estimates from the Melbourne, Florida radar is already indicating rainfall totals within 7 to 9 inches across the eastern half of Osceola County, and you can see a large swath of the region has already received in upwards of 4 to 5 inches, and some of those rainfall estimates are being confirmed by some of the stations that we have across central and southern Florida. We see 6.8 inches to the north of Palm Bay, and even in southern Florida, just to the southwest of Miami, some of the stations have recorded 8 to 9 inches of rainfall within just the last 24 hours. As a result, we see that much of the state is under flood advisories, in addition to some rip current advisories across the east coast of Florida. This is a current look at some of the surface observations, and several of the stations across the eastern half of Florida are recording maximum sustained winds in upwards of about 20 knots with gusts into the 30 to 35 knot range, and again, there are no signs of a closed surface circulation at this time. However, if you compare some of the pressure readings, we see that they are still rather high to the north of Orlando. We see a lot of 1019 to 1020 millibar pressure readings, especially near the Panhandle, but as we go toward the south into Miami and the Florida Keys, they really begin to drop off. We see 1012 over Miami, and as we go down to Key West, they are near 1011 millibars, and as the ECMWF model has been indicating, we may see some broad surface low formation to the southwest of Sarasota, Florida, but in addition to that, we will also eventually see another weak surface low try to develop to the east of Daytona over the next couple of days. This is the latest 24-hour meteogram from Miami, Florida, and as we can see, the precipitation totals are increasing by the hour almost. And also notice where we started off yesterday with the lowest pressure at around 1017 millibars, but the overall trend is for developing low pressure here across southern Florida. This is the latest 24-hour sea level pressure forecast from the 18Z run of the GFS model, and the GFS is now on board with the idea that a weak surface low will develop over the southeast Gulf of Mexico, but notice that much of the precip associated with it is still going to be displaced to the northeast over Florida and the southwest Atlantic, and as we go into the next couple of days into 72 hours, so this is getting into Tuesday afternoon, much of the state is still experiencing a lot of heavy rainfall, but the broad surface low is beginning to extend northeastward into Georgia and even the Carolinas. Land interaction with the state of Florida may limit the potential for this system to gain the classification as a subtropical storm, but we still will have to watch for that possibility near the Florida coast. This is now the 12Z run of the ECMWF model. Much like the GFS, by 48 hours we see a weak 1008 millibar low developing over the eastern Gulf. However, by 72 hours we see that second low formation just to the east of Jacksonville, Florida, and then by 96 hours the broad trough is beginning to spread northeast, much like the GFS was indicating, and as we go into the middle part of next week, the threat of heavy rainfall will extend well into the mid-Atlantic states, including North Carolina, northeastward all the way through Massachusetts. The latest Day 3 surface analysis forecast from the HPC is still expecting that surface trough to extend from the eastern Gulf of Mexico into the Outer Banks of North Carolina. By Day 4, we really don't see much in the way of any movement, so this is going to be a prolonged period of heavy rainfall, and as we work our way into next Thursday, the low is finally beginning to push east, but is still rather close to North Carolina. We've already seen the very high rainfall totals that have already taken shape across much of Florida, but unfortunately we have the potential for quite a lot still on the way. This is the 5-day precip forecast, and this threat will extend into the Carolinas, so the flood watches will more than likely be extended more toward the northward time. The rest of the Atlantic Basin is quiet for now, but as we go into days 6 through 10, the focus may continue to have to be on the western Caribbean, as it looks like the pattern is going to reload. We see that the trough is now anchored across much of the eastern United States, and as that trough continues to shift more toward the east, we will begin to see the surface high over the central plains begin to move toward the eastern seaboard, and there it is here by day 7, and that usually translates to more lifting over the western Caribbean and therefore lower surface pressures. Sure enough, as we go into day 8 and day 9, the low pressure over western Cuba becomes more prevalent, and in fact the European model is developing a second tropical system here to the south of the Florida Keys as we go into day 10. Now, one should not be carried away by a 10-day model forecast. However, the enhancing phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation is continuing to spread into our portion of the world. Here it is already over the eastern Pacific. That is why we have so much activity to the south of Mexico. And the model forecast continues to show the MJO moving into a more favorable position into phase 8 by the middle part of the month. So we very well could be dealing with more Caribbean mischief in the extended range. In the eastern Pacific, we have even more pressing concerns. We now have Hurricane Jova. Jova is forecast to strike Mexico as a major hurricane, and at the moment, Tropical Storm Irwin is struggling to survive, but the official forecast is also calling for Irwin to threaten Mexico, at least as a tropical storm. And finally, if that weren't enough, we have a new tropical disturbance to the southwest of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, and the Hurricane Center is giving that a 90% chance of development within the next 48 hours. Starting first with Jova, it is now a Category 1 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. It is forecast to become a major hurricane by 11 a.m. Tuesday, and it's going to be making landfall here somewhere near Manzanillo, Mexico, as we go into Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday evening, and finally by 11 a.m. on Wednesday, it should eventually weaken to a tropical depression over the more rugged terrain of Mexico. As the landfall becomes more imminent, the models are also beginning to converge on one specific area, and once again Manzanillo, Mexico appears to be the primary target, but all interest in this area should be bracing for major hurricane impacts in the event that the track shifts ever so slightly. More toward the west, Tropical Storm Irwin is still officially packing maximum sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. However, it is looking fairly sickly on the latest satellite imagery, and Irwin is expected to begin nearing the Mexican coastline near 11 a.m. on Thursday. However, the medium-range forecast regarding the system is still highly in question. Several model members are still taking Irwin more toward the east. However, there has been a noticeable trend more toward the north with time, and so therefore it could be somewhere in this region as we go into days 5 and 6. The latest Eastern Pacific enhanced infrared this evening shows both of our tropical systems. Hurricane Jova appears to be organizing, while Hurricane, or should I say Tropical Storm Irwin now, is looking rather sickly. In fact, if this trend continues, it very well could dissipate. This is a more zoomed-in image of Tropical Storm Irwin, and much of the remaining convection is now currently displaced to the southwest of the low-level surface circulation, which actually happens to be located right around here, and you can see that it is completely exposed from all of the strongest convection, and that is because the favorable upper-level ridge that has been located over both of our systems is now beginning to focus itself more so over Hurricane Jova, and we can see this even better on a different SIMS wind shear chart. Jova has continued to generate stronger convection, which will eventually lead to a stronger upper-level ridge, and that is the main reason why the upper-level ridge is beginning to orient itself more toward the east, and it's also helping to ventilate Hurricane Jova a lot more, so some of the outflow is beginning to kill off what is left of Irwin. Even on the North American sector water vapor animation, you can easily tell that Jova is beginning to take up a much larger area, and that's not really good news for Irwin just to the west. You can also make out the first trough over the Baja Peninsula. That is the main reason why Jova is taking that turn toward Mexico, and we have a reinforcing shot of troughiness beginning to enter the eastern Pacific out of the Aleutian Islands, and that is just going to guarantee that Jova does not make a turn back out to sea. The latest 24-hour ECMWF forecast shows Hurricane Jova to the south of Mexico. As we work our way into Monday morning, it's continuing to move in a general east-northeast to northeast direction. By 72 hours, it is now approaching Manzanillo, Mexico, as a strengthening hurricane, which does not bode well for interest in that area. So once again, you should be preparing now for a significant hurricane impacts, and hopefully it weakens within 24 hours of landfall, but do not bank on that at this time. Always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. As we go into 96 hours or Wednesday morning, the system is now beginning to deteriorate over the inland portions of Mexico, while the remnants or possibly what could still be Tropical Storm Irwin based on the latest official forecast is still expected to continue moving northeast as well. And as we work our way into Thursday, it is making landfall in the same general area. Even if this does not come in as a classified tropical cyclone, it will still promote more rainfall, which will more than likely turn out to be very significant. And the greatest risk very well could be flooding, especially since Jova is already going to be influencing the weather in that area within the next couple of days. Switching over to the 18Z run of the GFS is showing Jova making landfall in the same general area as we work our way into midnight Wednesday, and it still maintains Tropical Storm Irwin as a classified system out here over the eastern Pacific. And unlike the ECMWF, it is beginning to favor that more northerly turn as we go into Thursday and Friday. So this is a much slower and more northerly solution, and that is where the uncertainty regarding that system comes in. And as far as that tropical disturbance near the Gulf of Tehuantepec is concerned, the models are not overly aggressive with that system, which is certainly good news. However, we can anticipate a broad area of low pressure to persist over much of this area throughout the period, so we could still face the risk of some heavy rainfall. So just to summarize, we will still continue to monitor what is occurring near the Florida coast for the potential for subtropical storm formation, but with or without classification, the main threats will continue to be street flooding and some gusty winds and excessive tropical storm force, especially near the coast. And in the meantime, all interests here between Puerto Vallarta and Acapulco, Mexico should still be watching the tropical systems over the eastern Pacific, especially if you live anywhere close to Manzanillo, Mexico. That is the most likely region where Hurricane Jova is expected to make landfall as we work our way into the middle and latter half of the week. So please stay tuned to the official forecast, and of course always turn to 28storms.com and the Hurricane Tracker app for supplementary information.